Hey there, welcome back to my channel. Really appreciate you being here. So I've been really trying to figure out where I should go next with basically what I'm doing. And something that's popped up a bunch is basically the overemphasis of college, my personal experience with it. And if you're familiar with me and familiar with the channel, you know I watch pretty much exclusively Breaking Point News and Clear Value Tax. I do watch a little bit of Allison Morrow as well. But it's funny because this is the third time that Breaking Points has done a video on the topic of colleges recently. So it really got me thinking. It's something that it's probably one of my hottest soapboxes I never talk about. So I figured if I'm going to talk about, may as well talk about it here. So, also finally got a haircut. So if you look a lot different, also in honor of college, I decided to strap my my college shirt. Anyway, so let's get into some of the videos of what inspired all of this.
Central theme to how I see the world is basically that class and the growing divide explains everything about the direction of the United States since the 1990s. The problem with class, though, is it's really hard to pin down. What does class mean? Is it income? Is it ancestral wealth? Is it immigrant status? Is it racial? The answer is kind of all of the above.
So historically, typically the upper class is like old money and very British in thinking, like Victorian London type deal. Nowadays, it's becoming more and more different, and I agree with him, with Saagar on this point. He gets into it pretty in depth, but I'm just going to skip around this video a little bit to get into it. But I'll not spoil it. I'll let him tell it.
But as I've reiterated here many, many times, increasingly the best determinant of class is probably whether you have a four-year college degree or not. Now, before you explode, let me explain. I'm not saying people with a four-year college degree can't be poor, but instead that the four-year college degree is more of a proxy for how you see the world. If you went to college, you are way more likely to hold liberal views on race, to not be religious, to be sympathetic to the elite narrative in this country. And increasingly, that basically means you're a Democrat. That is why I controversially will say that if you're a plumber making $100K a year, but you didn't go to college, you're culturally working class. While if you're a Columbia film student who is broke, you're still in the upper class.
So he gets into more detail later on in the video. I'm not going to show the whole video because there's actually like 3 videos, and I'm just going to take little snippets out of each one. Also, a lot of what they're talking about has to do with like culture war type stuff, and that's not something I want on this channel at all. There's plenty of that out there on the internet, and it's just a cheap grab for views and whatnot. So not what I want to do here. That's more divisive than bringing people together, and I'd rather bring opposing views together and discuss like actual solutions. So anyway, moving on.
It's fascinating.
Oh, sorry, I never actually got into it. So basically what he was getting at was the percentage of people that basically run the nation, the elites is what he calls it, are predominantly college, not just people with a 4-year degree, but specifically people with a master's degree or above. Only 40% of Americans have a 4-year degree, and when I say only, that's a huge number of people, and I'll get into that later. But the main thing is that 16% of the people of the population have a master's degree or above, and those are the ones that are basically running the country. So that's ultimately the point he was eventually going to get to, but we'll go ahead and move on.
The non-college degree, the college degree. And again, I know people get upset about this, but it's like, it's not about income. And I wish it was. It'd probably be easier, but it really is worldview versus non-worldview and cultural experience.
Especially, well, I personally think that because so little of our politics centers around economics at this point, because neither party really delivers on economics, that means that cultural considerations become incredibly potent in terms of, how people align and associate with the parties. So, I mean, you have a lot of complex factors going.
Yeah, so at this point, they're going to dive deep into differences in race and genders and all this kind of stuff, and how adding a 4-year degree into the mix of the divide is going to basically widen the chasm even more. Also, they get into a lot of like pendulum type stuff involving swing elections, like have an incredibly blue election, then followed up with a incredibly red election, and it'll go back and forth. So anyway, that's a totally different topic that's definitely worth diving into, but not right now, not for this particular one. So what started all of this is this video from 10 months ago that I saw, and honestly, when I first saw this video, I was like, yes, please, we need more of this. They're definitely painting it as a very, very bad thing, and the reasonings make sense. I understand why. But after this, I'll really get into all my thoughts and try to wrap this whole thing up. But without further ado.
A huge actual decline in the number of individuals enrolled in college over the past decade, and 71% of that decline is driven by young men. Like that is the key fact. So it's not just the fact that there's this imbalance, because like you said, there's always, since we've really been in this post-60s period where women were increasingly educated at the higher education level.
Sorry, earlier they were talking about how there's been a huge decline in college enrollment amongst the younger generation. This was during the height of COVID and all that. And the main driving force is white males. The main driving force is males, not just white males, but they make up a larger portion. Go figure, because they're a larger demographic. But yeah, and then they're getting into how it's going to create another divide between racial tensions, gender tensions, and now we're going to have this college tension. It's going to be a growing factor that they're concerned about. I'm not as concerned. I don't think it's as big a deal as they're talking about. I see the potential for it, so I'm not going to say they're wrong, but I think they're overemphasizing potentially. Anyway.
45 though, yeah.
It's really starting to shift in one direction. So a couple really obvious things. It is incredibly clear that the college status quo is not working for young men. I don't quite understand the rate.
Yeah, so this is a conversation I was having just earlier this week. I think Tuesday was having, or when, I don't remember. No, it was last week. Anyway, not important. The thing was, I was meeting with a buddy of mine who manages a, I don't want to call him out too much, an auto body store. So like an oil change tire store type place. So anyway, so he's a manager, and he is having the hardest time finding people to work. The main issue they're running into is everybody has a college degree, and there aren't enough jobs for all of these college degrees. And they're not finding people who can either start the business, or the people, these are his words, by the way. He said they're not finding enough people that can start the business or that can work the business. There are tons of middle management people and not enough jobs for them. So he's been especially hit with a major labor shortage. He's jumped around to several different stores all around Indianapolis, and it's a consistent problem that they're having. So it's something I'll get into a little bit more in depth, but definitely relevant here. So the college system is not working. You were promised a bill of goods, and I'll conclude with that.
Racial part of this, because that's actually really fascinating, and
I'll conclude with that at the end of the video.
that's something that's going to take 10 other conversations to unpack here. But the key thing here is it's really not working. And what's so frustrating to me, I know this is frustrating to you as people who came up during the 2000s, we've had this conversation about we need apprenticeships and we need to do this and we need to teach people, the Mike Rowe dirty jobs thing. We've had this discourse for decades, and it hasn't actually changed the fact that this hasn't actually changed. So this is the type of article where it's not quite clear that you and I are going to come up with a perfect conclusion and solution, but we actually need to have a leadership class in this country who could say, hey, look, this actually isn't working. This is a big issue, because the final part here, we talk about this on the realignment all the time, but education, rather than race, is increasingly becoming the dividing line along our politics.
Number one.
President Trump did much better with working class blacks, Hispanics, Asians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So especially who are men and women. So as we're seeing whether or not you went to college, whether you went to grad school, becoming more of a delineator of whether or not you're going to be a Democrat or a Republican, you're going to see a further imbalance there. And that's going to be huge.
Yeah, he really.
So I guess I already recapped all that earlier, so there's not much more to say there. By the way, the Realignment is a podcast that the two of these guys do together. I think for this particular episode, Crystal was on vacation or something like that.
There was a guy who was just like, honestly, I just want to start working. So if it makes sense in particular, if your choice is between not even necessarily a trade school, but like a working job with not necessarily a good wage, but not a bad wage either, versus a community college online, I mean, I'm pretty sure I know what I would pick. So when I look at it from that perspective, and you start to strip away the sociological elements of college, and you make it a pure cost-benefit analysis, then you start to see, they interview a guy here who's making $15.50 an hour, packing boxes in an Amazon warehouse. Once again, not a great wage, also not a terrible wage if you're living in Perrysburg, Ohio. So when you look at it from that perspective, you're like, okay, I totally understand how that might work.
Yeah.
So this is something I'm starting to see more and more. My stepsister, she has some kids that are grown and going out into the work field, and they didn't go to college. They went straight into actually automotive. So most of I think all of my nephews on my stepmother's side of the family, I think all of them are mechanics now. It's funny you brought that up, like hard time finding workers, and everybody knows is doing that. So anyway, last segment, and then I'm going to get into my thoughts and what I think would be a possible solution.
Is that clearly something's going on, it's wrong, and we need to fix it. And as you said, part of the problem is, and naturally, look, I jumped to this too. You're like, okay, we need more like building trade school, or it doesn't work. This is actually the truth. In terms of the funding, I'm not talking about the schools themselves. Funding and the emphasis on that, it has not worked whatsoever, especially because largely it's still paired with the broken financial institutions, broken financial system in terms of lending, lack of uptick, lack of promise. You know, the states are all over the place because, again, education is local. It's very local in terms of what they fund, what they don't, what their tuition is, all sorts of these types of things. It all comes into play. I look at this, though, and as you said, it's going to change the whole country.
So, all right, then the last bit of the segment is talking about how there's going to be a disproportionate divide of people in upper management running the country. So, anyway, that's the rest of that. So as far as what my thoughts are on the whole situation, a lot of this is based on stuff I see similar to this. I'm not quite concerned about the class divide, but it's the main topic of all three videos, so I can just like not mention it. So anyway, the main point I did want to get into, the class divide portion, is and the other part of where I'm coming from is my own personal experience. So out of my own personal experience, when I was in my early 20s, my mom was like, yeah, so actually growing up my whole life, my mom was like, so you're going to college and you're paying for all of it. I'm not going to help you with any of it financially. So there's a big bill. And it's because their generations, and I've seen this in a couple other spots, I think some other news articles. So the earlier generation, or the boomer generation, they were always pushed like, hey, get a college degree. Your life will be so much better. You'll make so much more money. You'll have a better chance to live the American dream. But their tuition was much lower at the time, and there were significantly fewer people actually going to college than are going today, or even in the early 2000s. So it was very common practice for boomers to want to push that on their kids, and I think there was an overemphasis on it. I mean, I remember in my early 20s, I was a mover paying for college. As I went to school, I couldn't get a loan, and my parents wouldn't help me. So I had to work all through the summer, bust my butt, try to make as much money as I could, and then pay for my entire semester of tuition up front in cash because I was working a gas job. Whole other topic, 1099, how it's terrible. But anyway, so my solution that I see is I think there needs to be a mentality, a culture shift, and I think that is coming. Because there's, like I said, an overemphasis, and as my buddy said, there's too many people with shooting for middle management jobs, not enough people doing the jobs, and not enough people doing entrepreneurship. Saagar at the last bit was saying something that was huge and crucial to the whole thing. Education is extremely localized. That's why this type of thing can never be done, or this type of thing specifically meaning apprenticeships and trade schools and all this kind of stuff. Those are huge. I mean, my best friend, he never went to college. Actually, he was a high school dropout, and he makes six figures digging ditches. So, I mean, it's more than that. He lays fiber wire, and he, works a drill and whatnot. But anyway, yeah, he's very skilled, very intelligent, very knowledgeable, but he just doesn't have like a piece of paper to prove that. He just has good work ethic and is good at like getting people to do things that need to be done. So, and he's very well compensated for that. But yeah, I remember there was a report that came out saying that how long it would take for a doctor to break even with someone who is a UPS driver or a FedEx driver. UPS, FedEx, one of those two. And it was laughable, but the thing is, like, the amount of debt that a doctor has to get into and how long they have to delay their ability to start earning income is just monumental. So the amount of time they have to actually work in the field and making their goo gobs of money, a UPS driver, someone who went straight out of college, is making $80,000 a year driving a truck, like what, 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week. It's hard work, but they will make significantly more money in a shorter time span. And I think it took doctors like 10 or 15 years of actually working to be able to catch up to where a UPS driver was at. Plus, they have to pay off their college debt. So anyway, it's interesting. But yeah, I remember being really embarrassed in my early 20s. I was a mover, specifically an office commercial mover. I did tons of jobs in Eli Lilly and law firms, engineering firms, all this kind of stuff. And I remember being very embarrassed about being a mover. And anytime I was talking with any of the customers, I was like, oh no, I'm actually going to college. I'm going to Purdue School of Engineering. By the way, wearing an Irish shirt, that's kind of a joke. I went to IUPUI, but I was in the Purdue School of Engineering at IUPUI. IUPUI is Indiana University, Purdue University of Indianapolis. So it's like both schools together. Fun fact anyway. Yeah, I was like ashamed that I was like a manual labor type position. And it was really tough. I had to justify like my existence to other people, like other engineers. Like, yeah, I'm going for my engineering degree. Yeah, I'm going to be an engineer someday, and all this kind of stuff. And I was just really, really ashamed. But now that I'm older and see the usefulness of people who don't go to college and just go straight into making stuff, at the end of the day, you're making things. Like, you are creating things that the nation needs, and that's the a mentality shift that has to take place in this nation to get us back to being a producer nation. And I think it's coming because I think people are starting to see the overemphasis of college, especially now that college rates have been just climbing and climbing and climbing, and they're being a lot less restrictive on who they enter in, because they don't seem to care as much about whether or not you graduate, if you're doing well. They just want to get you cash money. That's their main priority. That's their main focus. Gosh, I remember I went to a brewery to hang out with a couple friends of mine that were about to move away, and this was our last get together before I could see him for a really long time. And I showed up a little bit early, and I was waiting at the bar, and I remember seeing two guys on the other side of the bar, not the other side, like super far away, but like adjacent-ish, like on the other corner. They were talking. There was a little bit younger than me, slightly younger than me. And they were talking, and I remember them talking about like their student debt and how they're still like crushed by it. And one of them said, yeah, but they can take away your car, they can take away your house, but they can never take away that college degree and that college experience. And I remember that was the exact same line that I was sold in like 2008, 2009, when there was some young girl called me trying to get me to re-enroll back into college because I was working all the time. I couldn't go to college full time. Is a lot more difficult. Plus, financially being able to afford it, everything up front, it was really challenging. So anyway, that was the sales pitch that she gave me. Was the economy is going down because 2008, 2009, economy is going down. You could lose everything, but you'll never lose your college degree. And she was pushing that hard. So there's no way that she was unique in coming up with this concept. That was something that she was told to push onto others. So it's interesting. So they were basically sold a bill of goods that wasn't actually true. And I'm personally seeing it's deeply frustrating for me because I never actually finished my degree. I got really close. It was like, I think 3 semesters away from finishing. And then life got really, really difficult. But anyway, like financially speaking, whatnot. But anyway, in my field, even though I was doing engineering work, I was actually outperforming other people in engineering type roles at my job. I would still not be considered for certain roles because I hadn't quite finished my college degree yet. Even though everywhere I would go at like all these career fairs, all these recruiters would be coming out, all the students, people, just other fellow engineers. It was like common knowledge by your junior year. By junior year, which is, I was in my junior year at that time, it was common knowledge that you only use about 4%. This is the quote that I heard from several engineers and other students. You only use about 4% of your engineering degree. All the rest that you do is all on-job training. And when I was working for a couple different engineering firms, I can vouch for that. Like everything I needed to do and was able to do was all on-job training. I did not need an engineering degree at all. And that was something I always thought was like, college is useless unless if you're going for like engineering or medical or something like really, really, really challenging. Then I learned like, oh no, actually engineering is not as detrimental, or having an engineering degree is not as detrimental as I originally thought. But medical, like it's really important to have a medical degree. And I had this conversation with some people who went through nursing school and are doctors, and they were like, no, I didn't learn anything my entire college experience. I learned everything I know and need to know on the job by doing clinical, or not clinicals, residency and clinicals. Those were the only times they actually like learned and needed the skills to do. So even that argument was kind of thrown out for me. So yeah, I mean, there was just a bill of goods that was sold to the boomer generation that was actually valid and true at that time that is significantly less valid and true nowadays. So now it's just a money grinder that's chewing up an entire generation. Everybody's missing out on it. Or everybody's getting eaten up by it. And a lot of people are missing out on being able to have financial freedom, to not have that student debt bearing down on them, and they could actually still get a decent job where at the end of the day they create something. So they built a house, they built an engine, they built whatever thing in the factory that they work for makes, like fasteners or screws or children's toys, something to make somebody happy. So all these jobs require skilled labor to create. And at the end of the day, you have the satisfaction of creating. Whereas if you're just in a 9-to-5 white-collar office job, just staring at a computer in a little cubicle all day, every day, making like the same amount of money, but you also have this huge amount of debt load, it's not the way to go. And there's a growing number of people coming into the workforce that are seeking that type of job, and there just aren't enough jobs for them. So anyway, I think the future's coming to where I think the Zoomer generation might start pushing more towards getting directly into the workforce instead of going to college. And I think the nation would definitely be better for it. As far as my plans are concerned, I think the easy peasy plan will be most impacted by this, if you're not familiar with that. Gosh, this is becoming a really long video. The easy peasy plan, I'll just wrap up with this and I'll be done. The easy peasy plan, if you're not familiar with it, is economic zone, easy, which is basically the federal government's taxation practices, what they tax and all that kind of stuff. And peasy is production zone, which is where things made and assembled. If it's made outside of the country, then it'll have a hefty tariff put on it. If it's manufactured or assembled outside of the country, outside of the United States, there'll be a hefty tariff put upon it. And 100% of the funds from those tariffs will go directly towards funding factories and installation facilities to make goods that are not created in America, or not, I'll say, have healthy competition in America. So anyway, that'll create more factory jobs, which will create better working conditions because they have to be competitive for the workforce. So there'll be better working conditions, there'll be better pay to incentivize employees to come to their particular facility. So I think those two things combined at this time would be really, really positive step forward for the country as a whole. I mean, America used to be a producer nation up until, I think, NAFTA in the 90s kind of shifted that away, and we're no longer a producer nation, and we became a consumer nation. And historically, all throughout the world, anytime a world power went from a producer nation to a consumer nation, they collapsed. So hope that doesn't happen here. Hope we can shift course and get back on track. But anyway, as far as my plan's concerned, that's how it ties in. Easy peasy plan would directly benefit from this type of plan, and it would directly benefit the people who don't buy into the college myth. So anyway, that's all I've got. I could probably make another video about the whole classism with college and my opinion on what college is really good for and all it really does, but probably best to leave that out. I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind one day. Who knows? But I do not have strong or have positive feelings towards college. Anyway, that's all I got for now. So really appreciate you being here. If you like the video, I would deeply appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up. Maybe even subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff like this. If you did not like it, I'm sorry, but I really appreciate you sticking around this long in the video. Also, I know I talk about a lot of different stuff, economy, politics, whatnot. Definitely try to stay away from culture war stuff as much as possible. But every now and again, I like to talk about fun stuff like Monday stream. So leave a comment below if you want to see more like casual stream stuff, or if you want to see more like thought-provoking politic, financial, economy type stuff. So anyway, appreciate you being here. Stay classy, and until next time, see you then.